What would you do if you had nothing to fear? What would you change if you had nothing to lose? What would you pursue if you didn't care what anyone else thought of you? Welcome to the Have You Seen Me Now podcast. I'm your host, Sherilyn. Have you seen me now? Have you seen me now? You guys, welcome to episode 1 of the Have You Seen Me Now podcast. And I'm telling you, if you're still breathing, this podcast is for you. I have been dreaming of doing this podcast for ages now, but as you can probably guess, I kept psyching myself out, telling myself there are a million podcasts out there and a million people who could do it better. I mean, who am I, right? Well, podcaster is brand new to the list, but for years I've been a singer, songwriter, vocal coach, piano teacher, music director, church musician, solo artist, swing dancer, self-proclaimed photographer, food prep fanatic, and personal shopper. Because creativity is my middle name, side hustle is my game, and moody musician, well, that's a title I honestly own without shame. It's like my superpower. I'm a feeler, a journaler, a writer. I think there's a book coming someday, but I'm getting on a rabbit trail already. Have you guys seen those memes out there on Instagram lately that have 2 photos side by side? And above one pic, it says how it started. And above the other pic, it says how it's going. It's the new millennial before and after that first appeared on social media last September. It's been used to describe all kinds of things: relationships, careers, politics, the pandemic. But my personal favorite growth type memes are the ones seeing like the underdog who look like a nobody and then they make something out of nothing, right? Don't you love celebrating the underdog? Like, when how it started is a dorky young kid on the piano taking piano lessons at age 5. And then the how it's going, we see a photo of him on an arena stage rocking out in front of thousands of people and owning his quirky, artsy self. So today, in this first solo episode, I want to unpack a little bit of how it started for me and how it's going, because I think there's so much we can learn from hearing people's stories. And then in future episodes, I can't wait for you to hear from some of my guests about how it started and how it's going with them too. But I think at some point in our lives, we have probably all felt something like invisible or unseen, unimportant, insignificant, inconsequential. All those awful words, right? Unwanted, unneeded, undervalued, maybe even rejected or disposable, despised, or maybe even bullied. But my hope and my heart behind this podcast is to take a few minutes out of your week to remind you, yes, each and every one of you, that you have value and purpose, and you are needed and you're wanted, and you are loved just as you are. But you also have permission to grow, to change, to evolve, to rebrand yourself and reinvent yourself. Because sometimes we need to remind ourselves daily that as long as we have breath in our lungs, we can begin again today. And that we're all in this journey together of learning about ourselves, bettering ourselves, and living out our purposes and our passions. You know, I don't believe any of us are mistakes. I believe that the divine creator, God, gave you a unique fingerprint, a unique voice. Truly. Do you know actually that your vocal cords are as unique as your thumbprint? Sorry, rabbit trail again, but I'm a vocal coach and I've always found that so fascinating. It's our jobs to use our hands and our hearts and our voices to the fullest. So this is a podcast to help you celebrate the wins and the losses, your growth, healing, and expansion, your skinned knees and battle scars gathered along the way, like badges of honor. And this is a podcast to remind you to follow the breadcrumb trail of joy that you find along the journey. Because it's the breadcrumb trail of joy that led me right here today to this moment, to these minutes spent with you. So stick around, because in a minute, I'm going to take a deep dive into how it started and how it's going in my heart and world. And then we're going to have ourselves a little heart-to-heart about how exactly things are going in yours. And my hope at the end of every podcast is that you are inspired to say to all the haters in your life, or even to your own inner critic, yeah. I might have been a lost, insecure, utter mess back then, but man, have you seen me now? This episode is brought to you by Starboard Stride, a unique boutique production company, record label, and sync songwriters collective based in San Luis Obispo, California. Starboard Stride is focused on writing songs for the TV, ad, and film industry and developing new artists, songwriters, podcasts, and producers. Visit starboardstride.com today and mention the Have You Seen Me Now podcast for 10% off artist development, podcast production, or coaching packages. Visit today's show notes for website and details. Okay, so now that we've taken care of all of that, let me tell you how it started. I was born the daughter of a pastor, and I grew up in the church. I was blessed with incredible parents who loved me, who loved each other, and were married for 40 years until Jesus took my mama home a lot earlier than I imagined. But I had great examples of parents who worked hard, sacrificed a lot, served others, and constantly challenged themselves to grow and change, taking risks, moving to new cities or states, and not being afraid to try new things. And I knew they followed God and they tried hard to follow his leading, and they believed in divine purpose for their own lives. See, my mom was the daughter of missionaries, and she had actually grown up in South Korea. Then she moved to the States for college, where she met my dad at Taylor University in Indiana, and both were super musical. And I have memories of singing around the piano, and I learned from a really young age to sing harmonies and create music. And I was always a straight A student, but I was the epitome of a geeky, awkward, chubby, insecure, nerdy, quiet, withdrawn girl with frizzy, curly hair. Ironically, though, I was blessed with big lungs. And as a child, my mom often encouraged me to use your indoor voice when I would get a little too loud. But that led to me being a natural born leader, which expressed itself in high school by me trying out for the cheerleading squad. Now, a little caveat here that I had started playing the flute in middle school and loved it, excelled at it even. And then in high school, I picked up tenor sax and played in the jazz band. And then one summer, I picked up the oboe and I started playing in the summer orchestra. So yeah, I was a total band geek. And I had the best time. Then I took my big old lungs and I joined the concert choir and the show choir. Yep. I basically lived out the TV show Glee and had the absolute time of my life. Well, maybe except for the relentless teasing by the cool kids who thought we were all total dorks. But this brings me back now to the cheerleading tryouts. Let me say, I think when I showed up at the tryouts, that all the gorgeous, cool chicks stared me up and down and then looked at each other like, oh, what the heck is she doing here? And I may not have had a cute outfit and I may not have been one of the cool kids, but I had a voice and I was musical. So I had rhythm and I could shout and project. I could dance. I could clap in time. and I was just a natural born leader. And so to everyone's shock and amazement, I made the team. In fact, I made the team instead of one of the coolest girls in school, like prom queen kind of cool. And I'm not sure anyone ever quite forgave me for that, but I was thrilled and I loved the act of cheerleading itself. Like I loved the games and the cheers and the dances and camps and leading school spirit. But what I didn't love was the haters and the bullies who teased me on the days I wore my uniform about being overweight and being heavy-chested. And they would shout from the grandstands like, "Watch out, Dolly Parton, you're going to hurt yourself." Or I'd be walking on the sidewalk in front of my high school and people would yell like, "Moo," out of their car windows at me, or shout stuff like, "Look, a beached whale." And the bullying was just so much. And so I finished my freshman year, but I never went out for cheerleading again. I quit. The cruelty of others just like took all the joy out of it for me. Now, can I just pause a moment before I go on and say this? I believed these haters. I totally believed that I was fat and gross, and I felt so ashamed. And I knew that I could kind of barely fit into the skimpy, tight cheerleading uniforms that were passed down to us. So I knew that I was bigger than the girls they'd had on the team in years past. But man, when I look at photos of myself now in that cheerleading uniform, I was not fat at all. I was strong. And honestly, I was fairly lean, but I was muscular and broad, and I developed early and I had a chest, but I was not obese. But thanks to the bullies, gosh, I sure believed that I was. So much so for the next 3 years, I put cheerleading behind me and I dove into music. But the beautiful thing is that actually ended up really being my life's path. So let me just say, I also never really got asked to school dances. And I wasn't so popular with the boys. And I actually wrote a series of blogs a few years ago, but I titled it, "Fat Girls Don't Deserve Love and Other Lies I Believed for Way Too Long." And my story is a long and winding one to finally loving and accepting myself. And I think it will take quite a few podcasts to unpack it all. And that piece isn't exactly what I wanted to talk about today, but it's a piece of the puzzle on how it started for me that I think is important to note. Because for me, the weight issues had kind of been my kryptonite. You know, like in the Superman story where there's this unusual substance, the kryptonite, that when it's near him, it cripples his powers and he cowers in fear. And so I think my lack of self-worth at times in my life has caused me to lose my voice. It has silenced me. It's caused me to doubt myself. And I would bet that each of you have a kryptonite in your life too. You know, like that weak spot where the darkness knows just where to poke you to bring you to your knees. And I think that our journey is a lot about learning to avoid the kryptonite. Like one of my favorite pastors used to always say, like, never holler whoa in a mud hole. You know, like don't allow yourself to get stuck in the muck when things get rough. Like keep moving through it and drive your way out of it. You know, giddy up and get out onto the other side. So what started to happen in my teen years was I took my leadership voice and I started writing songs. And then I got hired by churches to lead worship. And then I started writing blogs and I started traveling and seeing the world and sharing my story and my music. Now I'm going to be skipping over a whole lot of the big parts of my story that we'll undoubtedly dive into in more detail another day. But the twists and turns took me through being signed to a Christian record label and touring for a season to it all like crumbling into a million pieces when my husband walked out on a Friday night and filed for divorce. to a year later when my mom began a 7-month battle with cancer that ended in her horrible and painful death. And all of that just about took me out. But before my mom died, she wanted me to finish one more album so she could hear it. And so I busted my butt to make it happen. And with the help of some dear musician friends in Atlanta, which was home base at the time, we put together, I think it was like a 5-song EP. And after my mom passed, then I moved to Nashville for a season and recorded another EP. I toured out of my car for a while, and I lived with friends in spare bedrooms or basements for a few years. I felt like really lost and kind of unsure what I was doing with my life. And then some Brazilians reached out and told me they had recorded some of my worship songs in Portuguese. And they asked if I'd want to go down to Brazil and lead worship for this national pastors conference in Brazil. Talk about an invitation I never would have anticipated. But I ended up doing several different short-term trips to Brazil. And I learned the 6 songs of mine they had translated in Portuguese. I learned them in Portuguese, just phonetically. And then I learned another half dozen of popular worship songs in Portuguese, so that I could go and have like a 12-song set list for these events in Brazil. So I had gotten several different invitations over the course of a year or so and made several trips. And then at one of these trips, they asked if I might want to move there, like more long-term, to teach music and develop musicians and worship leaders and train bands and such. Now, around this time, that movie came out. We Bought a Zoo, or maybe it didn't come out around that time, but that's when I saw it. And, the one with Matt Damon and, there's so many great quotes in that movie. There's that one about, having 20 seconds of insane courage. And that's a good one for sure. But the one that actually stuck with me most was when a reporter asked the lead character in the movie, why he bought a zoo. Just this normal guy, a widow with kids, no experience with animals or whatever. Why on earth would he buy this failing zoo and try to revive it and put all this work and all his money into it and everything? And his response was, why not? So when asked if I wanted to move to Brazil more long-term, I said, why not? And so I sold most of my belongings. I saved a few keepsakes at my dad's, took a couple suitcases, all my instruments, and trekked it on down to Brazil. Now, my story in Brazil, that's for a whole other podcast, but that was such an amazing adventure, and I have so many incredible stories. But when my Brazilian visa ran out and my journey there came to an end, I heard about a job opening in San Luis Obispo, and that's how I came here to California. So, how's it going, you ask? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because honestly, I am still fighting the fight to find my voice. Every day is a battle. These last 7 years or so in California, I've had a few unexpected job shifts, friendships shift, loss of loved ones, recovery from bankruptcy. We've seen our nation shift. We've seen the world in a pandemic. And so much strife and division and hate rise up in the world. And I believe it is more important than ever that we all find our voice, that together we stand for the things that really matter. And the universe will work hard to take your voice from you. Your kryptonite will creep back in and tell you you're no good, that you have nothing to offer. It will use people you respect even to hit you where it really hurts. I've had a vocal coach tell me that I don't have what it takes to make it as an artist. But you know what? Every time the kryptonite of self-doubt creeps in and tries to steal my voice, I usually end up writing one of my best songs. I kind of hate that I feel like I write my best songs in the darkest of times. On the darkest days of my life, right? But at least God takes my ashes and does something beautiful with them. But I still had to show up, like I still had to sit down at the piano with a journal, and I had to wait and see what would come flowing out. And you have to show up for yourself. So how it's going is that a lot like high school, I am diving into music again. This time, writing for the realm of TV, ads, and film in hopes of finding a platform to share my heart and music with the world in kind of a whole different way than I've explored. And dang, I'm finding so much fun in the journey. Like, even if I never get placed on a project, I just don't regret a single song I've written, recorded, or produced. Like, I feel like they're all part of my healing. Like, I did it for me, right? It gives me life. And then there's this crazy podcast idea that I just couldn't shake. The idea actually started over a year ago, and I just kept procrastinating, and I didn't ever feel brave enough to go through with it. But how I got here, honestly, is this. 2020 was one of the hardest years of my life, probably for many of you. It's probably one of the hardest of yours too. But for me, it's not just because of the pandemic or the protests or the wildfires or all those things. But I went through some dynamics in my professional and personal life that kind of pushed all my buttons of insecurity, of self-doubt, discouragement, despair, self-isolation, self-hatred, shame. I think really I went through like a slight nervous breakdown. And it was scary. And it was hard. And it was painful and so lonely, but thank God for some supportive friends and family who saw me through it. And thank God for my therapist who has given me some incredible tools in my recovery. And so it was actually in one of my sessions that my therapist encouraged me to visualize my future self all healed up and happy and whole, and she has all her needs met, and to ask her what it is that she has that I need. And 3 phrases came to mind, kind of without even thinking, really quickly. And the 3 things were this: she has nothing to fear. She has nothing to lose. And she doesn't care what anyone thinks. And I knew I needed to ask myself, Sherilyn, what would you do if you had nothing to fear? And what would you change if you had nothing to lose? And what would you pursue if you didn't care what anyone thought of you? And so launching a podcast was one of the first things that came to mind. Because here's the thing. Do I hope that each of you is encouraged by these conversations? Absolutely. Will it be amazing to see these conversations impact others and cause change for the better in your lives? Absolutely, you bet. But that's not my main motivation here, at least not primarily. Primarily, I feel like I'm doing this podcast for me, for my healing, to help me find my voice again, to fight against the kryptonite of self-doubt, and to say, why not to another adventure? Because I really do have nothing to lose here. So I am doing this for me, to prove to myself that I can do it, and to remind myself that I have something to say, and to say to all the haters in my past, yeah, I might have been a quiet, insecure, overweight, awkward little kid back then. But man, have you seen me now? To all the people who tried to put out my flame over the years. You can't dim my light, right? Because I know I was born to rise. And what's cool? A song I wrote with my friend Ted Skolitz in Nashville actually sparked this whole idea for the podcast. I've known Ted a decade or so. We rubbed shoulders at a church in Atlanta where we both served on staff a while back. but he'd moved to Nashville and I'd moved to California. But somewhere in the spring of 2020, he had posted on Instagram a post asking if anyone wanted to do some co-writing. So I found my brave, even on one of my lowest days, and I reached out, knees trembling, and we wrote a song. And it's a song I'm really proud of. And the title of that song is Have You Seen Me Now? And so my special gift to you when we bring our time to a close today is to end this first episode with the song in full. I'm excited to say that the song is also available today everywhere that you can stream or download music. So be sure to check it out on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, and you can even use it to make a fun video on TikTok or Reels, which would be super fun to see your creation. So be sure to tag Have You Seen Me Now on Instagram so I can check it out. So stay tuned for that at the end of the episode. But here's the thing. I felt like I had this moment as I was headed into the new year that I felt like I need to head into this year with the mentality that a year from now, I'm going to be on the Grammy stage. And I need to live my life like that, full out, that fearless, that intentionally, like to wake up every day and train hard, sing hard, create hard, eat well, sleep well, to the point of saying that a year from now, I want to be my best self. I want to feel confident and I want to feel strong and fierce. I want to be ready. And, to get up there and sing this song, Have You Seen Me Now, with the likes of Taylor Swift and Beyonce and Adele and Carrie Underwood and these other women who have blazed a trail of fierceness before me and have inspired my own journey. But that idea to live every day with that kind of fire kind of underneath me. And so that's where I'm headed into this year myself. That's how it's going. That's how I want to live this year. And that's what I want to explore on this podcast with you. So, my stellar rock stars, let's talk about how it started and how it's going for you. So, what has been your kryptonite? What is that thing that has tried to steal your voice, your dreams, and has silenced your passions? Is something inside of you screaming for change? I encourage you to ask yourself these 3 questions, the same 3 questions that I've been asking myself, and to take some time this week to unpack the answers. Maybe you're a journaler. Maybe you want to just go for a walk in nature and just kind of still your mind. But are you ready? Here we go. What would you do if you had nothing to fear? What would you change if you had nothing to lose? And what would you pursue if you didn't care what anyone else thought of you? I want you to sit with these questions this week and to dive deep into your heart and sift through the kryptonite, silencing the voices of doubt. And don't be afraid to take some action towards your dreams this week, even if it's just baby steps at a snail's pace. And then I hope you'll come back and join me this year for more of these kind of intentional conversations about how it started versus how it's going, not only in my life, but also in the lives of some brave and inspiring friends of mine who've learned that it's never too late to reinvent yourself or to rebrand your whole life or to change careers or maybe to return to something you used to love doing, but you lost somewhere along the way. And I'll be right here cheering you on as you find your voice, encouraging you to not be afraid of recreating this next season of your life without worrying about what anyone else thinks about your dreams. Don't do it for them. Do it for you. Do it because it's what the Creator made you to do. Lean into the light with me this year. Like the warmth of sun hitting your face, and believe that as we go through this journey together, I think you might be pleasantly surprised where you end up if you allow yourself to say, why not, when opportunities bubble to the surface that truly excite you. And who knows, maybe one day soon, you'll be a guest on my show yourself, sharing your journey with the world. And can you imagine a day where you can say, yeah, you might have known me back then, the me that was super stressed out and insecure and lost and unsure and unhappy and totally unfulfilled. But man, have you seen me now? Thanks for listening to the Have You Seen Me Now podcast. I'm your host, Sherilyn. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share. I'm your greatest cheerleader, so come drop me a note anytime on my website, Instagram, or Facebook at Have You Seen Me Now to let me know the answers to your 3 questions and what dreams you're pursuing this year. As promised, here's my brand new single available everywhere today. Have You Seen Me Now?
Do you remember when I thought that you were my friend? Here's a trip down memory lane. You tried to put out my flame. I thought you were on my side. You thought you were justified. Said I would never amount to much. Have you seen me now? Do I look familiar? You tossed me out like yesterday's news, but now I'm center stage. Have you seen me now? You underestimated the worth of the girl right in front of you. Do you regret walking away? Have you seen me now? Whoa, whoa, have you seen me now? Whoa. This one's for all the invisible girls. Here's to moving on up in the world. So fierce we found our stride. So smart we're diversified. Cheers to the nights we swore won't live with being ignored. Headlines, big times, and here we are. Have you seen us now? Do we look familiar? You tossed us out like yesterday's news, but now we're center stage. Have you seen us now? You underestimated the worth of the girls right in front of you. Do you regret walking away? Have you seen us now? Whoa, whoa, have you seen us now? Whoa, it can't stop us now. It can't wear us down. Can't run us out. Can't hold us back. Can't take our pride. Can't dim the light. Can't steal our fire. We know we were born to rise. Have you seen us now? Do we look familiar? You tossed us out like yesterday's news, but now we're center stage. Have you seen us now? You underestimated the worth of the girls right in front of you. Do you regret walking away? Have you seen us now? Whoa, whoa, have you seen us now? Whoa, whoa, have you seen us now? Whoa, have you seen us now? Whoa, have you seen me now?